Hey, so my name's Shawn here, and I'm just sitting here with Anmin, who's representing modern Enlightenment. I am a Christian, and I just had some questions about Buddhism I've done a little bit of study on, and I got 33 questions for you here that I have written down.
Okay.
So let's just go ahead and jump right on into them. My first question is, what is Buddhism?
Buddhism is a philosophy. It is a philosophy of how to live life in a more compassionate sense. Because when the Buddha came into this world, he came into this world to teach us a way on how to end suffering. Because he saw that every single one of us suffer, and he taught through the Four Noble Truths that there's life, in this life there's suffering. And because there's suffering, there's a cause for suffering. And because there's a cause for suffering, if we stop the cause, there's an ending to suffering. And once we stop the suffering, we walk a path called the Eightfold Path. And then from that path, we start to learn how to change ourselves. We change mentally. We change how to say things differently. And we start to change our actions. And eventually, we start to change our whole life, because thoughts become words, become action. Action repeated over time becomes a habit. Habit becomes a lifestyle, and that lifestyle changes who you are. And so Buddhism is just a philosophy on how we can live life in the moment, being happy in the moment, and sharing with others on how to become happy as well.
All right. Now, my second question was, do you think there would be any Buddhists who would define Buddhism in a way maybe opposed to your explanation?
Well, of course. In one tree, you can see that there are different branches. And in Buddhism, there are many different branches. There's the three major branch would be the Theravada tradition, which means the way of the elders. There's the Mahayana tradition, which is the great vehicle tradition. And then there's the Vajrayana, which is the Tibetan tradition. And so these are the three major traditions that you see in the world. And of course, all those branches that you see, even though they stem out from the trunk, it all leads to the same root. And so there are different ways to describe it. And the Buddha said there are 84,000 ways to attain enlightenment. And so, of course, my explanation is not the ultimate explanation. It's just the explanation on how I use Buddhism in my own life, and how Buddhism has changed my life, and I'm sharing exactly what I know and how it affected me.
And would you say that you fall into either of those three branches?
We follow the Mahayana tradition.
Okay.
Yes.
Now granted, when I ask these questions now about Buddhism, they're kind of open-ended because they can cover all of this. But does Buddhism say that there is no God?
If you're asking God in a sense of if there's a creator, someone who's created this earth, and there's one person that takes responsibility of it, then no. If you're saying, do Buddhism believe in gods, as in plural, then we do. And we can also say that you yourself one day can become a god if you practice Buddhism in a way that you can achieve a higher state of consciousness. Then you yourself can achieve the state of godhood. But even if you become a god, there is still a sense of suffering, because there's also birth, old age, sickness, and death when it comes to God. Given that humans, we live in this lifetime, if you're lucky, you might live up to 90, 100. Average, I would say, is around like 60, 80 that people live. In the God realm, you might live up to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years old. But eventually, there's going to be a time when a God has to pass away. But if we're saying in a sense, do Buddhism believe in a God, that there's a creator, and we all give our glory to this particular God? Then the answer is no, we don't.
So I read an account that basically mentioned, quote, the gods of heaven appearing to Buddha, who's otherwise known as Shakyamuni.
Yeah.
And these gods of heaven, if you're familiar with them, who exactly are they?
They're celestial beings. And the Buddha taught in this world, there is what you call samsara. And in this samsara, there are 6 different realms. There's the God realm, the human realm, the jealous God realm. Then there's the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, and then there's the hell realm. 6 realms. And depending on our karma, which is the laws of cause and effect, depending on the karma, we would be reborn into different realms. So if you live your life full of greed, then you would be reborn into a realm where it's the hungry ghost realm. The hungry ghost realm, the Buddha taught that the being there, they have such a big stomach, representing their hunger that's not able to be satisfied. Their throat is very thin, and whatever food they eat, it will turn into fire. Because of the karma that they collected as being greed, they're born into a form where it just represents greed, and they're always hungry, they're never satisfied. If you live a life full of ignorance, then you will be born into the animal realm. So for example, you've seen our dogs at the temple. They might be smart dogs. You call them, they might come. You tell them to eat, they eat. You tell them to sit, they sit. But they might be intelligent, but they're not wise. Why aren't they considered wise? Because they do not know the laws of cause and effect. They do not know what's right and wrong. A cat sees a mouse, what does it do? It automatically chases the mouse. If it chases the mouse, it kills the mouse. Whether it kills the mouse or whether it knows it kills the mouse or it didn't know it killed the mouse, the laws of cause and effect is still used against it. And so that animal is still caught in this vicious cycle that will basically, it gathers more negative karma towards them. If you live a life full of anger, then you'll be born into a world called the jealous God realm or the Atula realm. In this realm, there's constant wars, they're constantly angry. Now, if you live your life just doing all those bad things, all 3 of them, then you'll be reborn into the hell realm. And in this hell realm, there's suffering, and there's they torture you and all that stuff. But any of those realms, any of the lower realms I just said, they're all temporary. They're all temporary unless you use up all your negative karma, you repay your negative karma, then you'll be reborn into a different realm. Now, the celestial God realms, the realm that you were talking about when the Buddha was reaching his enlightenment and the celestial beings, the God of the heavens come and they garnish him with flowers from above, celebrating his success, that's just one of the realms that you can achieve. But those realms, you do a lot of positive karma, you'll be reborn into that realm. The earth realm, where we are right now, is in that middle of the negative part and the positive. Because in this realm, we can experience both pleasure and pain equally. Now, some people experience more pain than pleasure, and some people experience more pleasure than pain. But in this lifetime, depending on our karma, we can experience both equally. And the celestial beings are just one of the beings that you can be reborn into, one of the God realms that you can be reborn into.
So the other question that I have is, how is the world today suffering less since the time of Shakyamuni?
The world now suffering less is we understand where our suffering is coming from. In this time right now, a lot of people are more, I believe, with the use of the internet that we have right now, with social media, we can gain knowledge almost instantaneously. The internet has given us the power to know anything and everything that we want with basically a touch of a button. And so once we understand the Dharma, which is the Buddhist teachings, we're able to use it in times to help us overcome our anger, our greed, and our ignorance. Unfortunately, a lot of people right now, they don't practice it. It's the same thing as a lot of people know how to lose weight and eat right? But how many people really are disciplined doing it? The Buddha taught us that if we attach less, if we learn how to help other people, if we learn how to stop being angry all the time, then that sets us a path towards happiness. But now people don't really practice it that much. And so, but now that knowledge is free and it's out there, we can able to access it. And if we choose to practice it religiously and apply it in our own self, then it can help us suffer less. It all depends on you and how much you want to change your life.
So the next question here would be, I've heard that Buddhahood is also referred to as enlightenment. Mm-hmm. So assuming that's true, this would mean enlightenment in what specifically?
Enlightenment here is escaping from that cycle called samsara. Basically, stepping away from the attachments that would make us suffer more. Attachment to greed, attachment to ignorance, attachment to anger. And if we learn how to detach ourselves from those things, then we learn how to, okay, for example, everything, if I was in a pool of water and the water is completely still, right? And I take my hand and I start splashing the water, then the more I splash, the more I hit the water, the more water will splash up. It'll get me wet, it'll get everyone else wet. But what happens when I stop hitting the water? Then the water becomes completely still. Then that analogy is the exact same way. Our mind, we tend to attach to things. We want that nice car. We want that big fancy house. We want to have more money. We want to have all these fancy things. We want to have that lifestyle that we see, that to be able to go anywhere and not work anymore and do all that. But the more you want those things, the more we have to suffer for it, right? And we might have to step on other people to get it. We might have to harm other people to get it. We might have to use false speech and condescend on other people to get to where we need to go. And doing all those things, it sows the seeds of negativity that in the future we're going to reap the consequences from it. But once we learn how to let go and not attach yourself anymore, then exactly how the water becomes calm, our mind becomes calm. And once our mind becomes calm and we're not able to attach to those things anymore, we feel like we become more free, more relaxed, and more detached. And that way, enlightenment is not somewhere far, far away. Enlightenment is at this very moment. If you're able to achieve it, that's enlightenment.
Okay. Did Shakyamuni write down any of his teachings?
He spoke about it. The thing about the story of the Buddha is that during his time, he went to go teach for 45 years, all across India, Nepal, and all that. During those times, he taught all the fundamentals. He taught the Four Noble Truths. He taught the Eightfold Path, 12 links of dependent origination. He taught about laws of cause and effect, laws of impermanence, laws of no self. He taught about the 6 paramitas, and basically at every single region that he went to, he would repeat it over time. He would say, for example, we're in Westminster, California. He would say it. You go to Los Angeles, California, he would repeat the same thing. He would go to San Diego, he would repeat the same thing. And so over time, his followers were able to record it verbatim. Only when he passed away, his chief disciple, one of his main disciples, Ananda, has a supernatural power of hearing things and remembering things verbatim. Only then, when they have the Buddhist council, was when they sat down and he wrote everything out again. But during the time when he was preaching, he didn't have anyone record it. It was only afterwards, when they sat down, they started to do things verbatim from their own experiences, and from hearing him speak for 45 years, they kind of memorized everything that he said.
So does Buddhism have any scriptures, and if so, would they be viewed as being objectively true?
We do have scripture. We do have sutras, And sutras is basically teachings. Some of the sutras, for example, like the Lotus Sutra, talks about different stories and different parables that the Buddha said during his time. And those stories and parables that he would tell a moral or somehow. Then there are other sutras like the Nikayas or the Dhammakaya, which would have verses in them. Verses like do good, avoid evil, purify the mind. This is the teachings of the Buddha. And little things like that, when we understand, we hear it, I was like, oh, that is a very great verse. That it helps us remind us what we need to do. Because if all the Buddhists were to come together and congregate in this room, they can actually compress all of the teachings to those things. Avoid all evils, do good, and purify the mind. And so that is what we need to do, is just avoid all evils, do good, and purify the mind. And all the teachings that he taught are all branches from that particular quote.
So my next question, I think you might have actually touched on it a little bit. It says, how do we know if what others wrote about Shakyamuni is accurate? And it seemed like your answer was that they came together and basically whatever they could agree upon became that. Is that correct?
Yeah, but at the same time, everything that the Buddha taught, when he said it's the truth, when he figured out the truth, he came about the answers through his own meditation. And when his own meditation, he basically looked within himself. All of the laws, like the laws of cause and effect, the laws of impermanence, he basically saw it within himself. For example, the laws of impermanence basically said that everything constantly changes, that nothing stays the same. Now, if we look within our body right now, my hand, for example, you would see my hand. Look deeper into my hand, I would see cells. Look deeper into a cell, what do you see? Molecules. Look deeper into a molecule, what do you see? You see atoms. Look deeper into an atom, what do you see? Electrons, protons, and neutrons. Now, if you look deeply at an electrons, protons, and neutrons, do they stay the same or do they move? They move. And how do they move? They move in a circular motion. And so even if my hand is completely still right now, my hand is actually moving. The breath that I breathe in is not the same breath I breathe out, because I breathe in oxygen, but I breathe out carbon dioxide. All right? And the body, even though we started this interview, we already grown like 10, 15 minutes older. So through our own introspection of this body, we can see that our body is constantly changing. And if we look out into nature, and every single tree out there started out as a seed. And through time, it grew into a tree. And even though it grew into a tree, over time, it's going to wither away and pass away. And so through the laws of cause and effect, we can see that if we plant a lemon seed, we'll get a lemon tree. If we get an orange seed, we'll get an orange tree. And through that just simple illustration, we can see how this law becomes a natural law. If I were to drop something, it would fall down. Why does it fall down? Because of gravity. And gravity is one of the natural laws of this universe. Is whatever mass there is, a smaller object will be attracted to the larger mass. And so everything that the Buddha taught was just what we can see in nature. It's not, we don't have to blindly believe in something that we can't see. We can actually see it in nature itself. And so when they all sat down and they wrote down the scriptures, or they wrote down all the teachings, it goes in line with what the Buddha taught and what they believe in. But even then, the Buddha said that. There's a quote, he said that, do not believe anything purely because it's religion. Do not believe everything purely because it's passed down to the tradition. Do not believe anything merely because it was taught by a teacher, by an elder, or it was something of ancestry. but believe something that you see that it's right, and how you can use it to change the quality of your life, and how your life can apply to it to elevate yourself from where you are now to somewhere better. So even if the Buddha said that, all of the thing, if you don't believe what he says, then you don't have to believe in it. But everything that he said goes in line with the laws of the natural laws of the universe. That whatever you send out always comes back to you. Everything in this world goes in a circular motion. And so that's it.
So obviously the kind of idea is that as the individual, right, you can accomplish enlightenment, right? You can escape from suffering. And in light of that, I was kind of curious, how do Buddhists avoid becoming prideful, right? Having pride in their own abilities?
The Buddha taught no self. And no self is actually very difficult to practice, because in this world, there's such an emphasis on the self. Even when we write down a sentence, our I is a capital I. Right? It's not a small I, it's a capital I. Okay. They place so much ego in the self. But when we realize that, when he said that there is no self, he shows that we're only here in this world because of the causes and conditions allows us. If I were to take a seed, we all know that if we plant a seed, a lemon seed, it'll grow into a lemon tree. Cause and effect. However, if I were to plant this seed, right, and I hid this pot in the closet, never tending to it, never watering it, not allowing it to see sun, will that able to grow? No. It only is able to grow if you have water and sunlight, right? Only then will the seed be able to sprout out. That's the exact same way. We're in this world. You're here is because at some point in time, your parents loved each other, natural things happened, you came into this world. You didn't ask to come into this world, but you came into this world. And I came into this world the exact same way. But then, once we understand that we're in this world together already, we have to see that we're dependent on everything. We're dependent on our parents, the love of our parents. We're dependent on the food that is needed. We're dependent on the air that is given to us. We're dependent on the sunlight to give us vitamin D to our skin. We're dependent on the water from the earth to provide us. And all of that, since we're part of this world, we're dependent on this world, we see that without the help of others and without the help of the sun, without the help of water, without the help of food, we wouldn't be able to survive. And so once we see that our body is made up of different elements, earth for the skin, water for all the liquids in our body, fire for the temperature, and air for the breath that we have. When we see that the four elements comes together and form this body through the causes and conditions, and we see that we're dependent on everything to nourish us, then we have to be humble. There cannot be a sense of I am successful because I did it by myself. That is completely not true. In any business that we know, the CEO cannot do everything by himself. The CEO needs the help of the vice presidents, needs the help of the managers, and they need the help of the employees to maintain this company that they have. So when the CEO says, I did it by myself, it's completely not true. It's the help of everyone that is involved that needs it to be successful. We're the exact same way. With this body that we have, it's given to us by our parents. But it's passed down through many ancestries and many generations for us to be where we are right now. And so realizing that we're part of something greater, then that's when we're not prideful anymore. That sense of ego goes down. And realizing that there is no self, it helps us on the path towards enlightenment.
So, does evil exist in Buddhism?
Evil exists in Buddhism, yes. Okay. The Buddha calls it unwholesome action. And now, evil can be, in Christianity, they call it sin. sin, there are 7 deadly sins, right? There's gluttony, there's sloth, there's envy, there's lust, there's pride, there's anger, and then there's lust, I believe. There's 7. And so in Buddhism, there's 3. And I already mentioned before, greed, anger, and ignorance. And through those, out of those 3, ignorance would be most deadly. Because through ignorance stems greed and anger. And so everything that we do in this world, whoever is evil, they do it out of greed, anger, and ignorance. Look into the media right now. There are pharmaceutical companies that are hiking up medicine so they can make a profit out of the expense of those paying for it. It's a representation of greed. You go onto any Facebook comment or any YouTube comment, you'll see this person bashing this person bashing this person. That is a representation of anger. Ignorance is not seeing the world as it is and believing your own hype and believing everything that you see as a truth and not just a perception. I write down the number 9 right now and I say, this is a number 9, but from your point of view, what number do you see?
The 6.
Number 6. But I argue with you. I say, this is the number 9. And you said, this is number 6. Who's right? No one's right. It's just a perception of what we see. Our perception of reality is not really the truth. It's just a one part of the perception. You have an elephant in this room, and you have 3 blind person touching the elephant. One person can say, the elephant is the trunk, the trunk of the elephant. And the other person holds touch the leg, and you're like, this elephant is this. And then the blind person in the back touching the tail said, this elephant is the tail. All of the three are correct, but it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever they're saying is completely true. And so evil exists in the way that if you attach just to greed, anger, and ignorance, then it leads to unwholesome action. And the unwholesome action repeated over time, it will become evil. Harming other people and doing other stuff, then that's representation of evil.
So if there's evil, then there's obviously good. Mm-hmm. And if the question that I have is, are these things objective or are they relative?
Relative. Everything is relative. For example, greed. Greed, I see money and I take it. But what's the opposite of greed?
Generosity.
Generosity. Now, if I practice generosity, then my greed will go away. Anger. What's the opposite of anger?
Being happy.
Happy or patience.
Okay.
Practicing patience. Once you practice more patience, then the anger that you have in your mind will eventually go away. Wisdom is the opposite of ignorance. Now, say for example, I have a cup of water, and this water is completely dirty, black water. Right? Dark water, black water, it's all this mud and all this muck and all this debris is in here. Now, how can I clean this cup of water without pouring the water out? I add more clean water to it. Now, eventually, clean water will come in. It will overflow the cup. I will basically dilute this dirty water, and then eventually all the dirty water will come out. The solution to pollution is dilution. So you dilute this water, this pollution you have, and eventually all the dirty water will overflow out and you'll have clean water. Then when you live a life of evil or negativity and you eventually do more positive things, you dilute all the negativity out and eventually your mind will be filled with positivity. So, yeah.
Okay. So I've read that in Buddhism, the mind is viewed as pure. Is this true for all minds today, like yours and mine, or is this only referring to at birth?
The mind of a child at birth is pure, right? But that's only temporarily. Because if you have a child, two twin, right, and you place that child in a life of wealth and you place that other child in a life of poverty, even though they come out at the same time, a year from now, they'll have completely different thinking, completely different attitude. So in the environment, it starts to taint their environment. But the Buddha said, all mind is pure in a sense that our Buddha nature, our true essence of itself, if you strip away all greed, anger, and ignorance, all of the bad things, all of the good things out, and you just observe the mind is infinite. There is no dirty, there is no clean. There is no up, there is no down. There is no, like in the Mahaprajnaparamita Heart Sutra, the Buddha taught that in emptiness, which is when the mind is completely calm, there's no more wisdom, there's nothing to attain, there's no clean, there's no pure, there's no eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind, there's no color, there's no sound, there's no smell, there's no taste, there's no nothing. It's just completely infinite, like space. And that the power of the mind is the exact same way. But because of our own ignorance, because of our wanting this and wanting that and attachment to this ego and to the self, we want that nice car, we want this, we want that. We start to harm others, we start to lie more, we start to indulge in drugs and all that stuff. And next thing you know, we cloud our mind. Exactly, if we were to have a clean cup of water and I start to put a drop of food coloring, blue food coloring, eventually the water would turn blue. I drop yellow food coloring, the water would turn basically a yellow, right? And you start to mix different colors in there, and now you start having this weird color. But what happens when you start to add clean water to it? Then you start to dilute it. Because the essence of the water is wet, right? No matter what you do with it, the essence of it is still wet. So once you start to clean the water out and have pure water, it's still wet. So it's just the mind in itself is infinite, full of potential, that whatever you want, you can achieve as long as you set your mind to it. But if you set your mind in a motion where it's negative, then you're going to reap the consequences that is negative. Whereas if you put in your mind like fertile ground, positive things, eventually you will reap the benefits of everything that's positive.
So earlier I'd heard you say how everything was relative, and this kind of ties into this question because I had asked, is reincarnation true or false? Or would that fall under being a relative teaching? Or?
No. Reincarnation is not a Buddhist teaching. It's actually Hinduism.
Right.
Now, Buddhism, we believe in what you call rebirth. Now, what's the difference between reincarnation and rebirth? If I have a bottle of water, right, in order for reincarnation to work, you would have to believe in a soul. And the soul, according to the scripture, is eternal, never changing, right? So in the soul, if I have a bottle of water, right, and I open the bottle of water up and I pour it into a cup, then the essence of the water is poured into the cup. That's reincarnation from one soul, the soul from one form to another. But in Buddhism, we don't believe in a soul. We believe in what you call consciousness. Because to have a soul means to have something eternal, something permanent. But the Buddha taught that everything is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing. And everything is dependent on each other for us to be where we are right now. Consciousness is formed from is from mental formation, which is from a perception from a particular sensation. He taught in the 5 skandhas, there's form, sensation, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. And if we have more time, we'll go through it. But this is just laying out the basics. Consciousness is dependent on all these 4 things. And so how can I explain rebirth? If I have a bucket of water and I'll leave it outside in the sun, by the beginning of the day it's full. By the end of the day it's empty, half empty. Why? It evaporated. Now, if I touch water is wet. Water evaporating to steam, you touch steam, is wet. Steam goes into a colder climate, it condenses into ice. You touch ice, it's wet. 3 different forms, but the essence is wet. The essence here can be compared to our consciousness. Whether it's a solid, liquid, or gas, it's just a different form, like this physical body. And so when the difference between rebirth and reincarnation is that reincarnation is the water from a bottle to a cup. Rebirth is from that water can be transformed into a steam or water vapor, or it can be transformed into ice, depending on the condition. The condition here, whether it's a hot or cold, can be compared to our karma, whether it's positive or negative.
So, as I understand, there's some different stories as far as Shakyamuni's life coming up. Are these different ideas just kind of ignored for the sake of following something that they agree upon, or?
Well, what kind of ideas are you talking about?
Different stories that I've heard as far as, his upbringing, right? Some people believe that he was, born in enlightenment. Other people believe that he only achieved that later in life. Things such as that.
Well, different traditions. From the tradition that I was born and raised with, is that he was born into this world and he lived a normal life. And, being in this world, born as a prince, lived so many luxuries, everything was given to him. Even though the king built 4 different palaces, one for the summer, one for the winter, one for the spring, one for the fall. And even though he lived a life of luxury, over time it felt like he was trapped in prison. And only then when he was, because the reason why was when he was born, the sage Asita came and said, the prince will one day have 2 choices. One, he will become the kings of all kings, a universal monarch that basically rule the world. Or he will leave the palace life and become a Buddha. And so when the king heard this, he said that, I want my son to become a universal monarch. I don't want him to leave the palace. And so he would indulge him with of all the worldly pleasures. Any girls he want, he would have. Any toys he want, he would have. Any food he want, he would have. But over time, it felt like he was trapped in prison. And one day he asked his father that, I want to go visit the outside kingdom. And visiting the outside kingdom, on 4 different occasions, he saw 4 different signs. The first sign that he saw was an old man. And being in the palace, he'd never experienced anyone that's older than the king. And anyone that has their back bent or really old was removed away from the prince. And so when he first saw this old man with his back bent, he was appalled, he was confused. The second sign that he saw was a sick man. This person was on the ground coughing up blood, and seeing that sign when this person was just skin and bones, it was very confused. He was very scared. He was wondering, why is this person like this? The third sign he saw was a funeral, and that shocked him even more. And he starts to question, like, am I going to die? Is my son going to die? Is my wife going to die? Is my father's going to die? Is all my family and friends going to die? And when he realized that everyone's going to get old age, sickness, and death, the fourth sign he saw was a sage. And when he saw the sage, this ascetic person, very calm, very relaxed, and finding the truth, that's when he decided to let go and move forward to finding the truth. And so from then on, he went to go study for 6 years in hardship under different various masters, eating only a mustard seed, or a sesame seed actually, a day. He became just completely skinny, just skin and bones. And through that, he was able to, he couldn't find the truth. And he realized that being in a life of luxury, and also at the same time being in a life of extreme conditions, was not the right path. And that's when he said there has to be a middle path. And through that middle path, he went under a Bodhi tree. He started to meditate for 49 days. And through that meditation, he started to observe his breath in and out. He starts to be aware of what's going on in his own mind. He starts to scan from head to toe of all of the conditions that arises, all the sensation that arises, and he realized that any sensation that arises only passes away. And any attachment to the sensation will lead to more suffering or more pain or whatever. And he starts to see all that, and he starts to realize the truth. And from then, after 49 days, he achieved enlightenment. But here, from that story, it can be seen on both ways. It could be seen that maybe he did achieve enlightenment when he was born, and he only went through all that trials for us to see that he went through those trials. Or you can see it from another point of view, that he lived a normal life, and he achieved enlightenment after determination of becoming enlightened, of finding the truth. And it gives us hope that if we were to walk the same path and do the same things that he did, we can achieve exactly what he did. So you can see it from different point of views on how these questions or how these point of views and how the stories is, and how you can use it in your own life.
So you kind of touched on one of the things, which is this idea that Shakyamuni, it said that it was at age 29 that he first discovered all these things of the world. And one thing that I was particularly curious about is, you would think that in his life as a child, all the way up to age 29, that he at some point would have experienced sickness of his own. Mm-hmm. Or is the teaching that he was ignorant of it because he never experienced it?
I think that in the story, or in the story that I've read, is that he's always been a healthy child. Always having the right amount of food, always having the right amount of exercise, always being involved and being very active. Remember, he was born into the Sakya clan, which is a warrior clan. So they didn't just pudge out on the couch and just enjoy life. They actually trained very hard to become warriors. And so I believe that through his own practices and through his own training, that he didn't experience sickness as much as someone who has. And if he did experience the flu, I'm pretty sure he didn't really know. He probably recovered very quickly, rather than lying around in the bed feeling all the pain. And if he did, he probably didn't know that was suffering.
So tell me about who Mara is.
Mara is the Lord of Desires. And Mara is to tempt us away from the truth of the world and how it works. The Mara can be explained almost like the devil in Christianity. He controls 98% of the population around the world. Controls the people through fear, through desire, through attachment, through ignorance, through greed. And he used all that to help, to basically force us to be in a position for us to always constantly attract negative karma, to produce negative karma, to sow the seeds of negative karma that will have him have more control of us. But when we start to see the truth, when we start to become more awakened, we start to want less, we start to be less greedy, we start to be less angry, we start to become more wise, we start to give back more, then in that case, we're in a position where he's not in control of us. But to simplify your answer, who is Mara? Mara is just the Lord of Desire. He's that negative influence within the mind that forces us to want things negatively.
So what is Toschida?
Toschida is a realm, one of the celestial realms that I talked about before, in one of the higher realms, that if you were to practice the teachings of the Buddha, you do positive things, you help others, you inspire others, you develop others, you build people up, you teach them how to become happy, you live a life just positively. Then when you die, you're reborn into that world called Toschida. which is of the celestial God realm. But like I said, those realms, there's still birth, old age, sickness, and death. You might not die 100 years. You might die 10,000 years from now. However, from what I've read, a God who passes away, who is about to die, experienced a very, very painful death. Because in their life, they've never experienced pain. But you're only in this realm because you gain so much positivity. So eventually, once you use up all your positive karma, even if you have an ounce of negative karma, it's going to show up during your death, and you're going to experience a really, really, really agonizing death. And you fall back into the cycle of samsara. Eventually, once you reach enlightenment, you step away from the cycle. You break the cycle. You're not in the cycle anymore, but you break the cycle.
Would you say that the benefit of mankind is the central focus of Buddhism?
The benefit of mankind is, some people ask, what is our purpose? And the purpose for us to be in this world is to escape, to control the mind and escape from suffering. The benefit for mankind is once you learn how to do that, you have to turn back and you got to teach it with others. You have to share your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom to help others. Once I light my candle, I had to try whatever I can through skillful means, through my own wisdom, through my own experience, to light your candle. And even though if I light my candle with your candle, my flame is not going to be extinguished. You know, your candle, you can light 1 million other candles. And the same with my candle. My candle, I can light up 1 billion other candles. But the benefit is that once you learn the path to becoming happy, you have to turn back and share with others. That's the benefit for mankind.
So earlier, you had mentioned about how you said that everything was relative, and I had a question here that says, is truth important in Buddhism? But I guess to explain more fully on that, would you say the idea of objective truth is important in Buddhism?
Can you define objective truth?
So objective truth would be something that is true regardless of our perspectives, regardless of how we see things or how they affect us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, objective truth would be the laws of cause and effect. The laws of impermanence and the laws of no self. Because whether you want to or not, the law is always in constant motion. It's kind of like interest rates, right? Whether you want to or not, the interest rate is always there. Whether you invest in mutual funds and then you gain the benefits from it 10, 20, 15 years from now, or if you collect debt from a credit card, interest rate's going to work against you. The laws of cause and effect is the exact same way. It's there. It's always in motion. Whether you choose to work at it positively, whether you see an animal, whether you consciously kill the animal or whether you unconsciously kill the animal, the laws will work against you. If you see a donation box and you put a penny in, or you put in $100 in, at that moment, the laws will work for you. Whether I want to or not, if I throw something up, it's going to come down. Whether I want to or not, I'm not going to grow any younger. I'm going to grow older through the laws of impermanence. Whether I want to or not, my body eventually is going to wither away and pass away. And so those are all objective truth. Whether you believe it or not, it's always going to be true.
So is there salvation in Buddhism? And if yes, what is it from?
Salvation, you can see it from different point of views. You can either be very motivated and save yourself through your own practices, through your own meditation, through your own introspection, through your own observation of the body and mind, and through your own observation of greed, anger, and ignorance, you start to pull the weed out from your own mind. of greed, anger, and ignorance. Like this garden, right? If I don't tend to the garden, the weeds are going to grow. However, if I come to the garden and I take a scissor and I start to cut the top layer, and I don't tend to it anymore, then what happened? It's still going to grow back. However, I come to the garden and I start to pull out the weeds out and pull the roots out. Even if I don't tend to it anymore, it's not going to grow back because the roots are gone. But there's another part in Buddhism called the Pure Land Buddhism, where we rely on the power of the Buddha, which is the Amita Buddha, to give us a helping hand with our salvation, with our liberation, with our enlightenment. We chant his name, Namo Amita Buddha. And by chanting his name, it uses his name as a way, as a method to calm our mind down. And through our own calming of the mind and using the chanting of the Buddha, it helps us develop wisdom. So in that sense, we're using not really a higher power as a blind faith, but we're using his name as a skillful mean, to help calm our mind down, concentrate our mind, be in the present moment through mindfulness, and observe all the negativities in our own mind and start to remove it, therefore attaining wisdom.
So what you said actually kind of touches on my next question. My next question was, does salvation come from something you do or something Amitabha did? Mm-hmm. And it sounded like what you were kind of saying is that they kind of work hand in hand. Is that correct?
It works hand in hand.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that in any method that you do, there always has to be a sense of practice. There's always has to be. You cannot escape from it. There always has to be a sense of practice. Like, I can read 500 books on how to lose weight. I can be a master of knowing how to lose weight. But if I don't go on a treadmill and if I don't run, if I don't do any physical exercise, I'm not going to lose weight. I can read all of this scriptures, and if I don't practice meditation, or if I don't practice the chanting, if I don't practice what I've learned, I'm not going to achieve enlightenment. If I were to just blindly believe and have faith in the Amita Buddha, I believe in you, that's not going to do anything. There has to be a sense of practice in any form of Buddhism, and any form, and I say it with a recording right now. If you talk to anyone from Vajrayana, Theravada, or Mahayana, they will all of them would say there needs to be a form of practice.
So, would you say that worship of Shakyamuni is something that is supposed to be done or not?
The worship of the Shakyamuni Buddha or any of the Buddhists is not an idol, but it's a sense of deep respect for a master. Because without him, we would not have the teachings. Without the teachings, we would not be able to free ourselves. But because he taught us with the teachings, and he told us what we need to do to achieve enlightenment, a sense of respect is that we respect him. Exactly the same way, if the President of the United States were to walk into the room, everyone would stand up. Exactly how a judge will walk into a courtroom, everyone would stand up. Exactly how if you see someone that you respect, you would shake hands. In Buddhism, or in the tradition that in the ancient tradition, during the Indian tradition, or any of the Asian tradition, our form of respect is that we pray. When we bow down to them. Like in Confucianism in China, they taught us that we have to respect our parents. Whether they're alive or dead, whenever our parents say something, we have to respect them. We have to say yes. We even bow down to them. Like on our knees, we bow down. Indian tradition, they bow as a sense of reverence, as a sense of respect. We take that concept and we move it towards the Buddha. So when we respect the teacher, when we respect the master, we bow down to the master. In any of the tradition that you saw in the past, in all the Chinese tradition and all the Vietnamese tradition, the Asian tradition in general, you'll see that we all bow down to the master.
What distinction would you draw between respect and worship?
Respect is having a sense of veneration, having a sense of deep admiration. Worship would be idolizing, putting them on a pedestal and basically saying that everything that they say is true, and they would have the power to help us through our own salvation. Respect, or to be deeply venerated, is knowing and understanding what they've done, the struggles that they've been through, and knowing that they have fully accomplished everything that they did through their own struggles. And from then on, we highly respect them. The Buddha went through his own struggles, with his own trials, went through his own struggles to achieve enlightenment. Turned back, spent 45 years helping others to achieve the same enlightenment. And because of his hard work and all that, we deeply respect him.
So this is an interesting question here. What would you think if someone said that suffering, karma, dharma, and sangha don't exist?
If they say all those don't exist?
Yeah.
Well, we shouldn't be mad. It's just they just haven't understood it.
So you'd say they're wrong?
I wouldn't say they're wrong. They just, if I were to eat a bowl of ice cream that was just out of this world, and you never taste the ice cream, and you said such ice cream doesn't exist, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm just going to be like, bro, you have to try this ice cream. And once you try this ice cream, you're like, you know what, you're right, this ice cream was really good. So when someone says to me, karma doesn't exist, dharma doesn't exist, sangha doesn't exist, it just shows that they haven't spent the time to know exactly what they're saying. It just shows to me that I just need to spend time with you to share with you exactly what I know, so that it can broaden your mind to experience what I experience. There's no point of being mad. There's no sense of being mad, because if I be mad, I'm only putting into motion the laws of cause and effect that will only work against me in the future. So hearing that, I just need to know that, okay, you know, I understand and I respect your decision. I respect your opinion. But let me share with you my experiences. And through then on, I can open up their mind, and then they will be susceptible to changing their answers later.
So I'm going to freestyle a little bit of question that I had written here. Okay. But the idea is that, you know, through enlightenment, you are overcoming suffering. But would it be fair to say that enlightenment cannot overcome death?
Enlightenment can overcome death. And I'm only saying this based on the scriptures. I haven't overcome death yet. But in the theory, like I said earlier, if I were in a pool of water, right, and every time I hit the water, it would create a splash. The analogy of the 12 links of dependent origination, he said that through ignorance, there is mental formation. Through mental formation, there is consciousness. Through consciousness, there is name and form. Through name and form, there is the 6 senses. Through the 6 senses, there is contact. Through contact, there is sensation. Through sensation, there's perception. Through perception, there is... through sensation, there's attachment, right? Through an attachment, there is clinging, grasping. And through clinging and grasping, there's becoming. Through becoming, there's birth, old age, sickness, and death. 12 links. And all of them stems through ignorance. Now, if I was in the water and through ignorance I hit the water, sets into motion all that birth, old age, sickness, and death. Hit the water again, mental formation, consciousness, birth, old age, sickness, and death. Now, out of this cycle, I cannot remove ignorance because I'm not enlightened. And I'm already born into this world. I can't just take a gun and shoot myself and being like, I'm already born. If I break the cycle, if I kill myself, that ends the cycle. That's not true. If you kill yourself through suicide, you only plant more negative karma in the future. The only place in this cycle that you can break the cycle is sensation. Now, through sensation, there is greed, anger, and ignorance that arise, right, in your own mind. These are sensations. Through this sensation, you observe it. Observe the sensation, you'll see. If you were to attach yourself to the sensation, it will lead to grasping, clinging, becoming, birth, old age, sickness, and death. If you just observe it and just let it go, just observe it, you see that any sensation that arises will eventually pass away, right? So the Buddha taught that every single one of us have what you call a Buddha nature, that we all have the potential to become a Buddha. Now, if I have a diamond that's worth $100 million, and I were to cover this diamond in mud, debris, cement, and all that stuff, is that diamond still worth $100 million? Yeah. It still is. Now, what happens when so that Buddha nature of ours is like the diamond. We have layers of greed, layers of ignorance, and layers of anger. Now, through our own practice and our own meditation, greed arises. We don't attach ourselves. We don't react to it. We just observe it. It arises only to pass away. Greed arises. It only passes away. Ignorance arises. We don't attach ourselves to it. It passes away. So eventually, all this thing will start to bubble up. And if we don't attach ourselves to it, it eventually rise up only to pass away. And the storehouse that we have, the storehouse consciousness that we have, eventually, if we were to practice letting go of everything, then one day our Buddha nature would appear. And we're able to, and from then on, since we are not attached to any more sensation, there's no more clinging. If there's no more clinging, there's no more becoming. If there's no more becoming, there's no more birth. If there's no more birth, there's no more sickness, old age, and death.
Would you say that in Buddhism is the idea of atonement, if you will, is that kind of played out in the concept of karma?
Atonement as in
making right wrongs of the past.
Well, we have a ceremony called the repentance ceremony. And during this repentance ceremony, we bow 108 times to 108 different Buddhas. And we take the concept of this repentance ceremony through bowing, is that every Buddha that you bow down to, you gain one positive karma. And the exact same analogy of the cup. Every action that you do, every positive action, every clean water that you add onto this cup, it dilutes the negative karma. And so with that atonement, if you're saying that you done something bad, you killed someone, and you go to the temple and you confess your negative doing, you're like, dear venerable, dear monk, sir, I've killed someone. And the monk cannot just say, I hear your confession, therefore all of your negative karma has been gone. I can't do that. Even the Buddha can't even do that. Whoever reaps their own karma, whoever sows their own karma reaps the consequences from it. And so you might have to put in work, as in to do a lot of positive things. You might have to bow down. You might have to write down a whole sutra. But anything that you do, you cannot escape from your karma. You can, however, change it. Karma is another form of energy. positive energy or negative energy. But we know through science that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to another. And through that form of negative energy, if you do a lot of positive energy, you can change it from negative to positive. But you still have to, reap it in the future.
So my final two questions are a little bit personal to me, and I will often go out and share the message of the gospel, the message of Jesus Christ dying on the cross for sins with people. And often when I share that message, some people will respond simply with, "I'm Buddhist." Do you know why I would get such a reaction?
Okay. Because when I've been approached this, and since during college, I've been approached by many Christians, by many Catholics, and they try to convert me, and they try to share the gospel, and I respect all religions. But then when they say that Jesus died on the cross for us, then as a Buddhist, we would say, I'm Buddhist. Because by saying that Jesus Christ died on the cross for us, it goes completely against everything that we believe in. Not because we believe in Buddha, but Buddhists, we believe in the laws of cause and effect. Now, if you're hungry, right, Shawn, if you're hungry, and Jesus Christ were to be here, and he said, like, don't worry, Shawn, my son, let me eat this food for you, will that satisfy your hunger?
Probably not.
Probably not. Shawn, you're thirsty. Jesus Christ is right here. Don't worry, my son, let me drink this water. It'll quench your thirst. Will that work?
I can't imagine it working.
It can't work. So the exact same way when it comes to our sins and our wrongdoings. We are the creator of all the good things in our life, and we are the creator of the bad things in our life. When Jesus Christ taught that we have the kingdom of God in us, meaning that we have the power of God in us. And when he said that, that means that we have the power to do positive things. The exact same way how Christians would believe God did this for all of us. That we have the same power to do the exact same things for other people. But when someone says that Jesus Christ died on the cross for us, then it goes exactly against everything that we believe in. But then I'm not bashing on Jesus Christ, because when Jesus Christ died on the cross, what did he say to God before he passes away? Forgive them, Father, for they are ignorant. So before he died, he had a sense of compassion. That sense of compassion is something that we Buddhists can believe in, because we believe in being compassionate as well. And we believe in everything that we can do to help others achieve enlightenment, if they were to be kind to others, avoid all evils, and learn time to purify the mind. That's why whenever people say to me, Jesus Christ died on the cross for us, I said, no, it can't, because that saying alone goes against everything that we believe in.
So my final question, I'll read it as I have it here. It says, does Buddhism provide a way for people to receive forgiveness of their sins from the Creator God? And it sounds like kind of your answer would be that you would ultimately reject the premise of that question. Is that correct?
The Creator God gave us sin. Well, according to the story of Eden, God didn't give us any sin. It's because of Adam and Eve that ate the apple in the forbidden garden that God kind of just sent us down here and said, because of that original sin, you're stuck with this. So if you go all the way back to the original, scriptures, then he didn't really give us any sin. But as a Buddhist, we're born into this world because we have 1/3 ignorance, we have 1/3 greed, and we have 1/3 anger in our own mind. Because of that, we're born into this world. If we have majority greed, we'll be reborn into the hungry ghost realm. If we have majority ignorance, we'll be reborn into the animal world. If we have majority anger, we'll be reborn into the Atula realm, or the jealous God realm. But because we're in this human realm, we have 1/3 of greed, 1/3 of anger, and 1/3 of ignorance. And the Buddha taught that in order for us to elevate ourselves from this world into a higher realm, or ultimately to escape from this samsaric cycle and to achieve enlightenment, what we have to do is to remove greed, anger, and ignorance from our mind. It's not given to us by some God or by some higher power. The Buddha taught conquer your own mind. Conquer your own mind, and that battle is yours. That victory is yours. It cannot be taken from you by God or demon, by heaven or hell. Ultimately, what we need to do is to conquer the mind. If you conquer the mind, it doesn't matter if you win 1,000 battles. If your mind is weak, it's still bad. You conquer the mind, it's more victorious than conquering 1,000 battles. And so, like I said, if all the Buddhas were to come into this world and come at this very moment and explain to us what we need to do in this lifetime, he said, they will all agree on to avoid all evils, to do good, and to purify the mind. This is the power. This is a teaching of all the Buddhists.
Okay. Well, thank you, Anmin, for answering my questions.
Thank you so much.
And with that being said, is there anything else that you want to relay?
Oh, no. I would like to thank you for giving the time to setting up all these questions. And, I have fun sharing these questions with you. Did you have fun?
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.